Hello and welcome to Dicey Exploits, and first off, congratulations on finding this video, as there's no trace of me anywhere on YouTube, thank you NSA. And secondly, happy International Tabletop Day, a sort of Christmas-like holiday where friends and family can join together over certain artefacts known as board games, except it's kind of like a mega Christmas, because hopefully none of us will be doing it to Monopoly. And what better way to commemorate such a joyous occasion than with Yars's first ever board game review? So what should that game be? Well, why not the game that got me into tabletop gaming last year? Why not the game that kicked off this supporting structure in my flat, and a game that could potentially do the exact same thing? A little game called Pandemic. That's Pandemic. We should have thought of this. Pandemic. Pandemic pits you and up to 3 other human organisms in a battle against 4 very vile but very colourful different kinds of viruses, rapidly spreading across the globe. There is no time to study in the field of virology here, or even for dice rolls. What will happen is you'll be given a little roll with some cliff notes to make it look like you're a professional in it, and 4 actions. These actions can be spent in basic ways, like moving across the board, or in more complex ways, such as getting rid of one of these icky little disease cubes from a city you're in, or heading to a CDC and trading in 5 of these cards in a bid to uncover a cure for the disease. Once you find all the cures and fill up all these slots with these cute little wooden vials, you can go home calling yourself the Cure Curators, or the Vaccine Viscounts, or winners. Now once you've taken your 4 actions, you get to draw 2 cards from the player deck, and these can range from cities, which add your basic resources for cure management, or even direct tickets to cities you need to get to, or event cards, special little Uber abilities that turn your team of limited managers into the Justice League for a few short seconds. Then the game takes a turn. Depending on your infection rate, Pandemic starts to mock your use of opposable thumbs and demands that you pick a set number of cards from the infection deck. These cities or countries are on the Pandemic's hit list, and every time you draw one, you get to put a disease cube on it in a sort of mini geography game to test your skills on where things are. That's London, I know where that is, that's just outside the window. That's actually okay, because the player next to me can sort out just move over here and head to Washington and remove 3 cubes on his turn. That negates any damage done from that. That's absolutely fine. So yeah, the dispatch could then take 2 cards of their very own and draw for fuck! These little sods are hidden in the player deck like rusty stabs in the back. When one is drawn, everything stops, everyone groans, and we go through the following horrible process. We draw the bottom card of the infection deck. It's Karachi. That city doesn't get 1 black cube, it gets 3. We then put it in the discard pile, place it in the middle of the shot, shuffle it around in an incredibly nerve-ridden way, I don't recommend you shuffle like this, and place it on top of the deck. We then move the infection rate up 1, usually to a higher number, and that means with 3 we need to draw 3 of these on the next turn, and as our team is a finite number, the network of viruses is slowly expanding across the globe, and we need to add more cubes every turn, and then we're only going to come across another epidemic card, which means eventually the infection rate is going to be 4, and then we're going to have to draw 4 per turn. And basically, epidemic cards are 1 step closer to humanity ending. As stated before, there's only one way to win Pandemic with all 4 of these lovely wooden cubes. cures. But there are approximately 3 ways to lose Pandemic, and that's why I've been in such a tizzy every time I add one of these cuboid terrors to the board. How do you lose Pandemic, you ask? Welcome to my guide of death! Extinction condition number 1. Outbreaks. Should this little Krypton Factor-esque marker ever hit the skull and crossbones, we all die through outbreaks. But how does an outbreak occur, you ask? Well, I'll show you a little mess I made earlier. If you just come up here to the blue segment of the map, we've got a massacre waiting to happen. Should a card ever be drawn on a city with 3 cubes on it, an outbreak occurs, meaning that we don't get to put a cube on that city. We just put a cube on every city surrounding it. So lo and behold, Chicago is drawn, San Francisco and Atlanta and Montreal get hit, moving this little marker up 1 space for an outbreak. But it's okay. It hasn't hit the pirate icon. That's going to be fine. We're going to live. But we're not, because we've run out of blue cubes to put on the board and therefore hit extinction condition number 2, running out of cubes of any colour. In fact, this whole thing was actually completely irrelevant because we hit extinction condition number 3 moments ago when we ran out of cards, which means we've run out of time and we don't have any resources to draw from. So, sorry humanity. Pandemic is a very difficult and occasionally tiring game. These decks of cards act as tumours of stress on what's already an incredibly tense board. But despite this, there's a lot of fun to be had and a lot of replayability as well, due to how sentient a being the board becomes as you play the game, both in sinister and non-sinister ways. Sinister because the game always finds a way of screwing you over, and that's because of this whole epidemic mechanic, which is horrible and brilliant in its own right. However, in a non-sinister way, because these viruses all sort of build stories throughout the game. There's always one virus that will screw you over and stop you from doing anything else on the board completely. And you'll find that after a couple of turns, players will begin to name the viruses to their own liking. You might have the zombie epidemic hitting Africa, or bird flu hitting Asia, or Bieber fever hitting America. You get to decide how these people suffer. And it's quite good and fun. That guy thinks so too. Pandemic is not a game about perfection. It's about timing, it's about teamwork, it's about working with others to form one soluble solution, not going off to the other end of the map in a bid to become a hero. At one point somebody may look at Asia, engulfed in cuboids, and go, you know what, I can eradicate all these viruses in one swift move by picking up all the cubes. And everybody at the time will appreciate that, until the point where they don't. You see, if you're over there at one end of the map on one turn and something screws up, you might actually need to be on the other end of the map and the other in order to, you know, find a cure, which was what you were meant to do anyway, instead of taking all the bloody glory. It's like juggling. Say your team have 5 balls and they're all juggling each in unison, and at one point someone of you goes, hey, I know what we all need, a cup of tea. Being English, yes, of course, you're always going to need a cup of tea. It's basically 70% of your body. But in order to make that cup of tea, you chuck a ball in one of your teammates' directions, therefore adding their ball amount to 6 if you're good at maths. And this complication of juggling another ball means that you've gone and screwed up for the entire team. It means that they can't actually get the overall goal of becoming a good circus act at the end of the day. 5 juggling balls are barely enough to keep up that half-decent circling act performance, and 4 actions are barely enough to save the world. And, well, at the end of the day, if all your friends are juggling, none of them will be able to drink tea, so it's actually a pretty bad analogy. If there's one complaint that we made about Pandemic, it's a pretty universal one. It actually depends more on the people you play with
than the game itself. And it all centres around a mythical beast known as the Alpha Player. The Alpha Player is in it for themselves. They can't let anyone do anything. They have to be the team captain. They designate this pretty early on. It's pretty unusual for a new player to take it, but if they do, then they're a prick. Basically, the Alpha Player will don the lab coat, deem themselves team captain, and boss everyone around, therefore missing the point of the cooperative game entirely, and just, in the worst case scenario, making it a horrible game to play. In the best case scenario, a really boring one. And Christ, if you get two in a room together, then you're going to have a really fun discussion about probabilities and averages and random chance and really get into the science behind it. And that's not what Pandemic's about. Pandemic's about destroying viruses and saving the world and cleaning up. And we love cleaning up here. As the exploits, we really do. So yeah, banish the Alpha Player if you find them.
Call me naff for saying this, but I always feel the best board games I've played encapsulate a word or a feeling so well that they become masterpieces in their own right. Pandemic perfectly encapsulates hope. That feeling that even with extinction just around the corner, you can band your friends together in a bid to prevent it, even though you lost the game basically 4 turns ago. Despite its harsh tones, Pandemic is a very good gateway game. There's not a lot to learn, and all the actions that you can take during the game are on little reference cards that can be shared amongst players. Plus, you're on the same team. You're not going to let anyone lag. Just be wary of Alpha Player syndrome. There's a hell of a lot of replayability in this box, not just because of the random generation of the viruses, but because there are 4 to 6 epidemic cards that can be put in the player deck. And it can be replayed a surprising amount of times, and I'm not even counting the marvellous On the Brink, or in the lab expansions, which I'm sure we'll get to in another video. But as it stands, Pandemic has earned its place on the top of my game pile.